Presenting today, we have Chad Evans, and he is a senior applications engineer here at Saratech. He'll be talking to you about some updates in Solid Edge 2020, Part 1.
All right, thank you, Andrea. Well, again, my name is Chad Evans. I'm one of the applications engineers with Saratech. A little bit about myself. Some of my background has been automotive, working at General Motors and Chrysler, and also aerospace background as a Air Force mechanic in the Air Force, and also a licensed pilot. So I've got a strong aerospace background as well. So today we're going to talk about the Solid Edge and show you how, with the new Solid Edge 2020, we're going to get into some of the part design. We're going to touch on the simulation on the next part 2 of this process. We're going to show you some of the data management tools that we have today, and then later on we're going to look at some of the portals. So today, one of the things we're going to be looking at is the master mover model. We're going to be adding a kind of a bracket, or we're going to be doing a top-down design. And you can see here in the video, this master mover is for moving lightweight equipment, even large equipment, planes. I got this something very similar that we used to use, like similar to a tug, moving planes around. So this is one option the master mover is used for, but you can see here we use it with Cadbury, Ford, BMW, and we also use it even at Siemens. So today first section we're going to get into is the first 3 parts: the part design, the part drawing, and the data reuse. So the first part you can see here on the right hand side, we're looking at this bracket that we're going to be designing.
Hey, Chad, I'm so sorry. I forgot to mention to everyone, we do have some handouts in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel as well. So during the presentation, if you would like to download those, they are just some helpful tips about registering a composite ID, Solid Edge licensing, Solid Edge setup, how to reach us for tech support. So those are all very helpful documents for you to utilize.
All right, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, I actually had sent those over to Andrea, so that we're getting a lot of calls on our support line for Solid Edge 2020, where people want to move forward to it, or possibly they're looking at the new licensing scheme with the 2020, where they're putting their floating license on a server, and we're getting rid of the dongle. So as you start moving forward with the new software, you'll no longer be needing that dongle anymore. We're going to plug it into the server. So in the past, the Solid Edge was more of, some of the early CAD systems were history-based or direct modeling-based, dealing with features, some flexibility. But now with the Solid Edge, with the new Synchronous Technology, we've got a dimension-driven, it's highly automated, we're adding features, standard parts. So I'm going to show you some of that stuff where you're not doing a lot of pre-planning your design, we're designing right on the fly. Go ahead and bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to move over to my other monitor. So you can see here I have Solid Edge on my screen, and this is actually the master mover. So you can see here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a data set, and I'm going to remove my geometry because I only want to see certain things. So I want to look at the hydraulics and the clamps. There it goes. So you can see here in my assembly, we're actually going to be designing this little area right in here, this bracket. So I can go ahead and I'm going to select my part that's existing that I'm going to be using for kind of a design part of it. So you can see here I've got this bracket. This was a release part. If I come in and highlight the part, and I want to look at that subassembly, so I'm going to select my subassembly and I'm going to open that subassembly. So now I'm only looking at just a couple of my individual parts, so which is nice because I want to create a new individual part. I can come in here and hold down my quick access where I'm going to create a part in place. Okay, and I can accept that in a second. So let me double check that I'm using my ISO parameter, and I'm going to go by graphical design. That looks good. I'm going to highlight this part because I want to select my F3 and I want my axis to go at that location. So as I'm designing, I have that part. Okay, that looks good. And now we talked about data management tools. So you can see I've got my data management set up already, kind of a file structured database that's sitting in the background. I can actually go in and assign a part number within my Solid Edge internal data management system. And I want to just select that to my working folder, because as I'm building these parts, I want to place that into my working folder. It's not quite released yet. Let's give it a name, clamping arm. That looks good. And we can save that. So now I've created a new part. So you can see here on my tree, there's my clamping arm. I can come in here, select my extrude, and let's look at my face, because I want to use that existing face that I currently have, and say accept that. Now you can see here, I'm going to use my existing center line of my mating part. So as I come over here and select my mating part, boom, there's my part. That's exactly what I'm looking at. I designed right on the fly using my existing parts. Now I no longer need that, so I can do a Control Q and turn that stuff off. Now let's just rotate my part around. So now I want to build onto this bracket. And let's go ahead and select this, because next thing I want to do is I want to create a nice little cutout in here. And I'm just doing it right on the fly as I'm selecting a couple parts. And I'm just going to turn off my offset because I'm not doing any offsets. I want to go ahead and drag this surface across. So you can see now I've created a nice little cutout. And the computer and the Solid Edge will recognize that cutout, which is really nice. All right, that looks good. I can just hit the escape button there for a second just to make sure I've not cleared out everything. What we talked about synchronous technology was, as I select the parts, I can be adding geometry. I could take that vector and I can drag it across, okay? Or I can type in a value. So I make that 52. That looks good. But now what I want to do is I want to create a kind of a region on top of this. But right now, if I select this face, I have one large region. And I don't want that one large region. So I want to just create a line in that area. So I'm going to go back to my quick shortcuts and select my line. And we'll just create a line, we'll say somewhere on this face, but I'm gonna hit F3 because I wanna lock that in. And let's create a line, we'll just say from that area, we'll just make it perpendicular to this area. So you can see my constraint for perpendicular is on there, or vertical. There it is. I can hit escape there. So now, if I select that region highlights. Now I've got broken into two separate regions, which is really nice, okay? So I can go ahead and select that region. I can add material to it. If I drag it, I can remove material. So you can see it's right on the fly. And this is what we talked about, the synchronous technology. Now let's go ahead in here. Let's say 150. We'll do minus 37. I don't quite have my calculator handy, and the base I know is 37 because you can see down here that 37 geometry. So that looks good. Now I can go ahead and we can add some fillets on this. In Solid Edge, we call it round. Some of the other systems, CAD systems, we just call it fillet. Now if I come in here and I select an edge, it's going to remember my existing, my input, whatever my last input was. So I want to make this 15. All right, that looks good. Now if I pick the next one, the next line, it's going to remember that 15 because that was my last input. I can come in here, select. I could even select through the part, select top edge, and that looks good. And then I can right-click my mouse and say accept to that. So next, I also want to create a chain. So you can see here that before I was first doing an edge, now I want to do a chain. So I'm going to take this outer edge, and that's chain that one line. So if I select that one edge, but it's giving me an error message saying, hey, 15 won't fit. I know that because that was my last input. So if I say 2 to that, 2 looks good. Now I can come in here, I can select the 2 there, select the 2 there. Looks very good. Right click and accept that. So now I talked about earlier is adding this little cutout here in this area, but not before that. Let's add some dimensions to it. So I want to create a dimension here in this area, and right now that's 51. So if I move my dimension over a little bit, you can see here, let's make that 45. And then what I want to do too is I want to lock that dimension in at the same time. So you can see it earlier, I was just kind of doing design right on the fly. If I say enter that, it locks it in. Okay, so now I've got that dimension locked in, and that width is locked in. So next, what I want to do is I want to take this little cutout down here, and I want to create that cutout and make it a 180. So if I hit my shift and then my space bar, that gets it into a selection manager. And if I select the one edge of that cutout, it recognizes, see right here, selection manager. I can go to recognize cutout. So it recognized that that was a cutout that was created. So the solid edge has intelligence to this, and this model has intelligence. Okay, I hit shift the space bar one more time. It gives me my steering wheel. I can move that over. Now what I want to do is I want to select the midpoint here, because I want to take that steering wheel and put it over here on this midpoint. So if I hold down my shift key, grab that steering wheel, because I want to hold that, and select the middle line there. See, there's my middle point. Now I can take that cutout, create a 180 radius on there, not radius, but rotate it. And if I hold down my control key, it's going to make a duplicate of my existing design. And if I type in 180, so there it is. If I did not hold down my control key, it would be moving that cutout over. But if holding down my control key, it gives me a duplication. All right, that looks good. Now I can go in here, and I notice it kind of, this edge right here is built right into my radius. So if I select this edge, and I want to move it up a little bit so it's not into my radius. So let's move it up to about right there. Looks perfect. So now you can see if I zoom up on this, the cutout's not inside my radius. Okay, then I can go ahead and let's create a relationship between that existing face I have selected and this exact mating surface. And let's go 17 to that. And the reason I'm building a relationship there is, say if I wanted to do any design changes to this area, it's going to be locked in. So if I select this face, and what I mean by locked in is as I move my part around, see how that whole area is locked in? That's the reason I locked in that dimension. That's the reason I built those relationships. So that's a very strong tool of using this. Now we talked a little bit about driving our dimensions. So let's look at my top view of my part here. And let's just rotate this around a little bit because I want to add some dimensions on here. So I'm going to go to Smart Dimensions, and that's exactly what it is. It's Smart Dimensions. It's got some intelligence built into it. So if I come over here, it gives me a radius of 17. But I want the diameter dimension. So now there's my 34. I can go ahead and say, it says 34.25, but now I want to make changes. I'm driving my dimensions, and let's make it 34. I want to bring it in just a little bit. Okay, now if I select the dimension one more time after I've escaped out of it, I can come in here and go into add some tolerance to that dimension also, right on the fly. So we can add some tolerancing of 0.5 over maybe 0.25. That looks good. So I've added some tolerances on there. Let's go back to my smart dimensions. And now what I mean by smart is I selected the radius, it gives me a radius, but now if I come over here and I select the edge, it gives me a horizontal dimension. Let's just go ahead and place it right there at that location. It's 41. So now I'm talked about that driving dimensions. I want to make that 40. So you can see it pulls that part in a little bit. Let's go ahead and select the next radius. Let's pick this edge over here. I can select that existing dimension line so it lines up to it. So now it's at 31.3. I can make that 34. So you can see here, I'm making changes right on the fly. So that's what's really nice. You don't have to worry about any pre-planning in this area. I can do some quick design work and then come back, add some dimensions to it, and do some changes right on the fly. So you can see here, I'm at 10.6. But if I come over here and I take my scroll bar, and I've got a little scroll on my mouse, and if I scroll this down a little bit, you can see it's very dynamically. I'm making changes right on the fly. So that's a very strong tool. Let's just make that 8. So you can see it goes 8 throughout my whole part. So that's really nice. And then we can go ahead and you can see here, I've got some 3D dimensionings on here. So now it's literally called the PMI dimensioning. So I could come over here. If I don't want to see that, I could turn that off. Okay. So next we can see right on this area here, I've got this face. I want to add a radius or a hole in there. So let's go in here and let's create my hole. And you can see here, I'm going to select on this face. So I hit my F3. So I know I use that face as my reference. And if I come over here and just look at my options that I currently have, you can see I have a lot of options. My general holes, my simple, my threaded, countersunk, counter bore, taped holes. But let's just look at the simple hole. And let's just look at we'll say I'm using the isometric, standards today, but you can also see I've got a lot of standards in there. ANSI standards, DIN, some of the ISO, Japanese, inch, millimeters. Let's just select my ISO for right now. I want to create a general screw clearance. Let's do an FM10, M as in Mike. And let's just make that a closed hole. So you can see it's even giving me a little preview of what it's going to look like. Okay, or I could save this. If there's just something I would do all the time, I could give it a name and save it over here. And I've done that later when we start getting into the assemblies where I've saved my nut and bolt ahead of time. All right, so we can say okay to this. And I come over here, and if I didn't quite see this point here, I could come over here and highlight my radius, and then the point would show up. So there's my point. That looks great. I can hit the escape once, because now what I want to do is I want to create a pattern in here at the same time. And you can see I'm still in my input mode. All I did is I hit the escape once to get out of the hole command. I select the pattern. Now I'm in my pattern command. So I'm kind of building the speed of my design all at the same time. And let's just make this a fix option, because it's giving me a fit between the selection of the box. But I just want to go to fix, because what I want to do is I just want those holes to be 20 millimeters apart from each other. So there they are, 20 millimeters apart. That looks good. Now I can go ahead and escape from there. All right. And then if you notice here, I can turn on my PMI a little bit, turn that back on. Let's look at my front face, because now that part is pretty much 90 degrees. And I know when I was designing it, hey, I know I had to give it a little bit of design change to it. So I can come in here, I can select this little area, just what I want to change. Okay, it gives me my steering wheel. If the steering wheel was at a different hole, I can move it around. So say if it was over here at this hole, okay, I can move it down to wherever my pivot point is going to be. So you can see I select the point. I selected actually the whole circle itself, and it snapped to the center point. Now if I take the steering wheel and if I just drag it a little bit, so you can see here I'm just dragging it, and it's dynamically, and that's kind of a preview, but I say I actually want 5-degree angle on there. So I type in the 5-degree angle, gives it to me. So that looks great. Now I can turn off my PMI dimensioning. All right, that looks good. Next, I want to get into some material. All right, so you can see here, there's a lot of different databases that we currently have. There's the presentation I've got loaded up. I've got some Solid Edge 2020 stuff. I've got some aluminum, iron, steel. I'm just looking at the cast stuff today, so I can apply that to my metal that I currently, because this is going to be a cast part. So you can see there it is. Looks good, but this is a cast part, and I'm going to be machining this area in the middle. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my view and use my part painter. And if I select this face, okay, and this face, you can see now I'm starting to get my machine parts. And if I go to my top view, I can do a multi-selection. So I can select everything at once. So you can see now I'm starting to look, hey, these are the areas I'm machining. But now I can go back to my features, and I can actually pick on the fly right in my part. So there's that hole I originally created. Or I can come over here on my tree and select the pattern. So there's multiple ways of selecting this part. All right, so you can see here the part's pretty much done. Let's go ahead and save this to make sure it's good and saved. All right, so next thing I want to do is let's go back to my screen for a second here. All right, so you can see some of the areas that we covered: driving dimensions, using some of our feature base, the flexibility, making some of the 5-degree changes, building the face relationships. Okay, and you can see it was, the Solid Edge has the best of both worlds. Okay, especially with the Parasolid engine in the background. So now we can get into some of our part drawings. So I'm going to build an existing part or a drawing for my existing part that I just designed, but also it's going to import some of my dimensions that I already had. So let's go back to my Solid Edge screen. And I can come in here, let's hit the save button, make sure that's good and saved. I can say I'm going to create a new active drawing of my active part. And you can see here I've got a template that's already built up for a quick sheet. So now here's my quick sheet, but remember those dimensions that I already had in there? So there they are. I threw it right into the drawing, which is really nice. So I can come in here and create in some smart drawings or smart dimensions. So you can see here, if I pick my first line, it's going to give me the length of that line. If I pick my next line, it gives me the length of that one. But if I say A on my keyboard, it's going to give me my angle of those two lines that I just selected. So now let's go in here, let's select the 2 lines there. That looks good. So what I mean by smart dimensions too, if I select a fillet or a radius, it's going to give me that. So there's a hole, it gives me a diameter of 10. If I select this edge, it gives me a radius of 5. So even the inside, so say even the inside, I have a radius of 2 on the inside. Talked about smart dimensioning, okay? Also, we can get in here to distance dimensioning. So if I pick the distance dimensionings between these 2 holes, there's the 20, okay? I could build onto this. So there's the dimensions from the first pick to the last pick, okay? And you can see they're all grouped together too. So if I exit out of there and if I take this one, highlight the 1, I can actually drag this out and keep that group together. So which is really nice. Okay, we can come in here to some of my call outs. So here's the call out dimensionings. So if I look at my call outs, what are some of my call out features? You can see I added a little leader on there already. And let's look at the text on there. Let's look at my smart dimensioning. So maybe I want this to say through. So I can say okay to this. If I select that hole, it gives me a diameter. It's drilled through the entire part. So that's a call out there. Okay. Or I could come up above and maybe even add some datums on here. So you can see here I can add a datum on there. So let's start off with my datum A. All right, and I create my datum A. And if you notice, I just selected the radius on there. So I can select the curve area, or I could come in here and select a straight area or a baseline. So I've created a couple little datums on there, so which is nice. Let's say, remember, we had this dimension on here, the radius of 34. So I can select this 34. Let's bring this out a little bit, kind of different location. And let's build onto this. So if I select this, I'm going to build a feature on there. So I can literally say, hey, I've got a minimum material distance between datum A and datum B. And it can actually build onto this. So let's say if I had a datum C on here, I could add a divider on there and then add another datum C if I wanted to. Oh, it actually took my whole thing away. All right, so it kind of gives you an idea. Let's look at some of the radiuses on here. So you can see I can put a center line radius on here of the first holes. All right, so let's go up above. We can do a center line radius of this one of my holes. There's the line there. I can do a radius of my different holes, or maybe if I had a horizontal and vertical, which is giving me, but say if I had a dimensional axis, okay, I would actually select this line here as a reference, and then I can come in here and select all my holes at once. So it gives me all the radiuses, all the center lines at one time. We actually have a center line here of my existing, the hidden data. So I can select these 2 lines here. Gives me my center line there. or maybe even up above, so something even on this part. So you can see there's multiple ways of doing this. I can select that line, drag it around. Okay, it looks good. Let's even look at some of the detail stuff. So if I wanted a detail of, we'll say this area here, and if you notice, I'm holding down, well, I'm holding my Alt key. So let's actually go out of there for a second. So if I hold my Alt key down and then select wherever I want my center line to be, that is going to give me the center point of that radius. So which is really nice. And I can come in here and make this 4 times. And let's rotate this over here to 4 times the view. So if I come in here, if I have a radius here, it gives me a radius of 2. Even though I'm 4 times the size, you can see here, it remembers what the original dimension is. Okay, so a little bit on the drawing side. Okay, so I can come back and let's look at, next we're going to get into our legacy data. So you can see we're want to make sure we use up all the time here. I'm at 1:30, so kind of give me a few more minutes here. So you can see some of the stuff that we've covered, some of the rapid dimension creation, some of the automated stuff that's available. But next, maybe we want to get into some of the drawings and some of the data reuse. Okay. So this is where we're going to cover, maybe if I had a part that was sent over to me from AutoCAD, or it was a 2D file that I currently had from before. Okay, and I want to just bring this into my drawing and create my 3D part. So I'm using a data management tool. So actually, remember, I can save this drawing. So here I'm literally creating my part. I'm saving my part and my drafting right into my Solid Edge data management tools that I currently am using. So I can say yes to this and say save it. So now I've saved that geometry, but also I want to come in here and I want to open up something new. And I'm going to search my database. So if I come in here and hit the search button, I'm going to go into this quick search criteria. And you can see here, I kind of already set something up already, but here I've got the file types and there's many options in here that you can do a quick search to. And I wanted to look at all my DWGs. If I had to maybe even add some keywords to it, I could, but I know I've got this drawing out here. If I do a quick search on it, it shows me the drawing already in my list because it remembered whatever I selected last time. But if I double click on this, which my template I want to use. So there's my ISO template that I'm currently going to use. It's going to take that legacy data, which you can see on the screen, which was developed in 2D, and I want to throw this now into my 3D. So Solid Edge uses layers. So we can come in here and select my layers, and let's just turn off my border. So I can come in here and hide my borders. If you go up here to Tools, I have a Create 3D. So I'm going to select that icon, and let's look at some of the, I've got a part that's already set up, and let's look at my ISO. Here it is. I've got a template already set up, so I go Import. And I'm going to go ahead and say Next to this. We'll select my first view one more time. I'm going to say Next. Select my second view. And I want to set my fold line. So you can see there's that fold line. There it goes. It's selected perfectly this time. Last time it was selecting a point, and that's not what I wanted. Okay, now I can say Finish to this. So now here's my existing part. So it was a 2D geometry. So you can see I've got 2 different views. The fold line is where they're mating. Okay. And then now I can actually take this geometry here. Remember earlier we were just selecting and maybe even an edge of a part. Here I'm just selecting this geometry, and I'm going to go ahead and select this endpoint of this other one. So I'm going to take this axis, and I'm going to drag that across so I see that endpoint. So there's the constraint that just popped up for endpoint. That looks good. Now I want to use that other 2D profile that I just created. So I can come in here and go to my extrude, and I'm going to create a chain. I'm going to select my chain. So I'm going to just select this chain. All right, say accept this. Now I want to keep the geometry in the middle. So I'm going to say, okay, that looks good. But I'm also going to cut out. So you can see here, as I rotate this forward, It cuts that geometry out. We'll say okay to that, and it looks perfect. So now I don't need this geometry over here anymore. I could just kind of zoom up on it. I can use my quick pick. That's the old sketch there that was remaining. I don't need that anymore. I can just select these options and just delete them out. All right, but remember, I needed to add that little value, that little radius in here. So this is where the round works very perfectly for that. So I can come in here, and it's set on chain right now. That's not what I want. I want an edge. So I can select that edge, and we'll go, I think it was 30. Yep, that was 30, and then we'll go 30 on the other side. So you can see there, that looks perfect. I'll accept that, but now I also had a hole in there. So I can come over here and select my hole. You can see here I put a little hole cylinder, and I want to select this face. So I hold my F3 because I want to work with that little face there. And I come to the edge, that center point is going to pop up. So here I can be dragging how big my hole is, but I know my hole is 18. There's my hole, drag it through my part, and it cuts it out automatically. Looks great. So you can see here, I've got a solid part, but maybe I want to make some changes up above. We talked about driving dimensions. So I can come above, I could be selecting one of these geometries or one of the dimensions. And you can see here, I've got my arrow pointing down right now. Say if I want to scroll this down, I can just scroll it with my mouse, scroll it up, or I can scroll it down. So you can see it's moving dynamically into the part. And I just want to make that 10. That looks good. Hey, this 116, I don't quite like that. I want to double click on my dimensions, and I'm going to select my arrow on the left side because I only want to change the one side of it. And let's make this 110. All right, so I made some changes right on the fly, which is really nice, okay? But you can see here, this is a geometry. It needs to be converted to a sheet metal now. So I can come back over here. I can convert this to a sheet metal. So I'm going to select my actual solid I currently have, and it's convert this to a sheet metal. So now you notice it just swapped over to my sheet metal environment. So if I come over here to my tab, there's my tab that I created. There's my flange that I created. So you can see, but what's nice about 2020 is they just added this design for costs. So you can see in here, I've got no fields filled in yet. So if I kind of put a little template together. So if I highlight my area that I currently have here, just copy this. So you can set these up however your supplier gives you, what your cost is. So now you can see this part's going to cost me $21.81 to design this part. Okay. So I can come in here. It looks good, but maybe if I wanted to make some changes to this part. Okay, if I want to make this fillet of 6, I can come in here of 6. All right, and then maybe I want to add a little gusset in there, but at the same time, if I look at my part, okay, I can actually, might want to. This is legacy data, so I might want to maybe save this and put it right into my assembly tools. So let's do that. So let's go ahead and save this right now. And I see we're running pretty good on time. And I want to assign all these, and let's just call this bracket. So now I'm using my data management tools that are built in to Solid Edge. I'm saving this part as my bracket. Now I can literally shut this down. Don't need my legacy data no more. I can turn that off. Oh, it's asking me on my other screen, do I want to save it? Nope, I don't want to save it. Okay, but now I can come back in here. Here's my existing part. Don't need that anymore. So let's go ahead and close that part so it goes back to my subassembly. So you can see there's my design part that's placed in the position. Excuse me. Now what I want to do is I want to put that bracket that's mating to this CPU here, or this module. So I can come over here to my parts library. And because it was in the working directory in my data management, there's my existing part, the bracket I just designed in 3D. So I can kind of rotate this around a little bit and kind of rotate it into position. That looks good in my preview window. And then I can drag this over on my screen. There's my part that's currently in place. So you can see here now, I'm literally gonna assemble this with my assembly. So if I put my cursor on top of that radius here, I use my quick pick, my button number 3, select my radius. So I want that radius to match up to this radius. All right, that looks great. So now I'm kind of putting it into position. So now I want this face to touch this face, and I want this edge to line up parallel to this edge. So that looks pretty good. So now I'm slowly putting this in a position. But because this was legacy data, my 2D geometry was a little out of date, I need to make some changes here. So you can see here, I want to do a quick go to my tools, or excuse me, inspect, and I want to select this measure angle. And I want to select the bottom of this face of my module and the top face of this one. And you can see that I'm 10 degrees off. So if I highlight this area, it shows me in my preview window here, my measure angle window, I am 10 degrees off. Okay, so I can escape that. But what I want to do now is I want to make changes right on the fly. So I'm going to edit this in place. So it's already in place in my assembly, but now I want to make changes to it right on the fly. I can select this edge, but that's not what I want to drag, is I literally want to drag, I want to create a 10-degree angle. So if you notice there, I'm going to select that axis. And all I did is I took my steering wheel and I moved it down. I grabbed my steering wheel and just slowly move this up a little bit. And you can see I need to go a -10 in that direction. So if I type it in, -10, that looks good. If I hit my Control Q and bring my preview back in, you can see everything looks good. All right, but you can see some of the holes are not quite aligned up yet. So this is where I can come in here. I can select my little area that maybe I want to line these holes up, and I just hold this steering wheel and I want to line that up to that center of that hole or that axis. And if you select this area here, it's going to drag everything at once. So if I drag this over to the center line of this hole, you can see here, it's even giving me my preview as I move things around. Okay, you can see I'm going to select the edge, the center line of that hole. That looks good. So now I'm lining these holes up. All right, now next I need to line the top portion. So I can come in here, and I can exit out of that one, out of that input. That looks good. So now I got this steering wheel and I move this down to my existing, I'll say right to that edge. That looks good. So you can see my center point pops up. I come down, select move this down to my center point of that one. That looks good. I'm going to line my holes up. All right, and we'll say okay to that. All right, so you can see it updates my drawings, my part right on the fly. So now if I come back to my design for cost, so you can see now it went from $21 to $23. So this is great when I'm designing my tools, but now let's maybe add a gusset in here. So I'm almost wrapping up with my design here. So I can be adding a gusset, and I want to add that to my midpoint. I'm going to select the gusset on that radius, but if you can see, it gives me a preview and I'm not sure exactly where to put it. But remember, I selected that midpoint. So if I move this around a little bit, that midpoint is going to pop up on me. So you can see it pops up. I make my selection on the point. Now I come back here to my design. So it says at $23, but if I do analyzing my part and do an update, boom, it just went from $23 to $30. So that looks really nice. Now I can come in here, I can save this, I can turn off my PMI, I can save my part because this is my assembly that's currently in play. Okay, and then I can return and exit out of this. That looks good. And you can see now I designed this bracket, my legacy data, all within my assembly. So I'm kind of doing a top-down design. And I'm just wrapping up here. So you can see we've actually utilized our legacy data. So we converted that. We went into some of our history-free modifications. We imported our geometry, our 3D part that we created, threw it right into our assemblies. Okay, so then some of the notables takeaway from today, synchronous technology is very strong, gives you accelerated design, faster revisions, better reuse. So better reuse was my legacy data, but also, we put some quotes out there of some of the customers that we currently support today. Our next section, we're going to continue on with my design here. We're going to be adding my assemblies, creating my exploded views with assembly drawings, doing some simulations on my part to see if that bracket I designed was strong enough to withstand the loads. And then even getting into some of our solid edge free portal applications where some of my customers might not have solid edge, where I can load these parts up to my portal and they can be viewing that data.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. Yeah. Well, our next couple of sessions will be on different topics. You'll be getting emails about those, but part 2 will be on April 2nd. So I really appreciate that. And we'll see how that kind of all ends up. And if you're looking for any services, training, hardware, we offer all of that as well. So please make sure that you reach out to us if there's anything that we can help you with. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. And thanks again, Chad.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for checking out our channel. If you like what you saw, make sure to like and subscribe down below so you don't miss out on any new videos. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter for the latest engineering news and information. And to see all of our upcoming events, please visit our website at saratech.com/events.